Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Taylor Riggs, and we're counting you down to the closing bell, here to help take us beyond the bell. It's our global simulcast with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. We welcome our audience across Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg Radio, as well as on YouTube and Quick Take. And Carol, a day where it looked like we had a nice little rally on our hands. 2 minutes to the close, we're all in the red across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the momentum to the downside certainly picking up over the last 10, 15 minutes. So we're pretty much at our lows of this session when it comes to the S&P and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. NASDAQ kind of making its way. And if you look at most of the names in the S&P, Tim, we are definitely seeing more of a risk-off trade as we get into these final few minutes of trading.
Yeah, interesting to finally see some conviction in today's trade on a day when the S&P 500 moved between gains and losses more than a dozen times, really, and kept moving until the last hour of trading.
It's interesting that I think we're still struggling for a narrative. We're in that weird intermediate point where we're coming off of CPI, we're pushing forward to PPI, we're still in the middle of getting a lot of Fed speak this week. We are having a lot of global conversations as well. So I think this is a market, Romaine, that is still waiting for that next data point after the big rally that we had at the end of last week after the previous data point.
And if you're looking at technical levels, it's kind of interesting to look at the pivot graphs and see how tight those support and resistance levels are. The resistance at 39.92 earlier today and at 40.26. And that was tested pretty hard earlier in the day. We should point out support right now is at 39.40. We're not far off that here.
Indeed, I was going to ask you if your support lines were dotted or full lines of shade.
They are full lines, cyan, magenta, and I think marigold are some of the colors on my screen. If you're looking at the screen on your Bloomberg television right now, well, it's pretty much all red across the board. The Dow Jones Industrial Average that had been one of the bright spots earlier today going to finish lower by roughly 200 points or 0.6%. The S&P 500 lower by 35 points or 0.9%, while the NASDAQ composite is going to finish the day down by more than 1%. Similar story for the Russell 2000, Carol, down more than 21 points or roughly 1.1% on the day.
Yeah, so the volatility index, the VIX also moving up, very definitive as we saw equities move to the downside. We saw the VIX move up more than a point, about 1 1/3 points. Taylor finishing the day at 23.85, so almost 24.
I have to say, the story on a sector level looks a little bit different than we did a few hours ago. You really start to see the selling pressure show up underneath the surface. Carol, there's only one sector in the green. How defensive is this? Pharmaceuticals and bios, they're up about 1%. Everything else, though, is in the red. Even the best performers are still off 1 to 0.2%. Let's then come to the bottom of the screen where we can get a real glimpse into some of the big losers on the day. Some of the retailers, I know that we're going to push forward to those numbers tomorrow, consumer durables, and then, of course, some of those rate-sensitive sectors, real estate and those auto components, those are off 2.6% on the day.
So, Taylor, you show that at the top of your list is pharmaceuticals and bios, and here's maybe two reasons why. Biogen is among the outstanding movers, if you will, in terms of gaining in the Monday session. Biogen up almost 5.5% at its highs, finishing the day with about a 3.3% gain, topping the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100. This is after Roche's Alzheimer's disease drug failed to meet the main goals in a pair of large studies, which analysts said takes out a potential competitive threat for Biogen's therapy. So Roche's loss is Biogen's gain in today's session. Moderna, also a standout, up about 4.6% at the close, also topping the S&P 500, was number one in the NASDAQ 100. Not sure if it finished that way, but nonetheless atop that list. Moderna coming out and saying its bivalent vaccine sharply increases antibody levels against recent COVID strains when compared to a fourth dose of its original immunization. Pfizer also topping the S&P 500. We've been seeing some of these drug companies come out and talk about that latest vaccine when it comes to some of the Omicron variants. So that's out there. So Moderna, an outperformer. And Netflix, outperformer, up more than 7% at its highs today, finishing the day with a 3% gain. It's been top among the NASDAQ 100 and S&P 500. No real news of note, but there were those 13F filings coming out, and there were some hedge funds cutting their holdings in Netflix, others adding. Stock is up around 19%, give or take a little bit, in the past 3 trading days.
Well, Maverick Capital, of course, added big to that, now has a pretty big stake in that company. Yeah.
But there was another one that also sold. So I'm just saying that there's kind of some, buyers and sellers when it comes to
right, Two Sigma. But yeah. I think a lot of people now are starting to wonder whether there's an activist component to some of these holdings.
All right, good color on that.
Okay, well, speaking of sellers, there are some sellers in Amazon today. A company, the third worst performer on a points basis in the S&P 500, down 2.3%, planning to lay off about 10,000 workers. It's the largest layoff ever at the company. It could begin as soon as this week. They're going to likely target the devices group. That's Amazon's Alexa assistant, as well as HR and the retail divisions. Also comes on the same day that we heard from Jeff Bezos that he plans to give away the bulk of his fortune during his lifetime. He is worth about $124 billion. According to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Tesla shares finishing the day down by 2.6%. They fell as much as 4.9% earlier in the day, but recovered some of those losses at the end of the day. This came after Elon Musk said that he's, quote, got too much work on his plate, that's for sure. He's saying that he's working the absolute most that he can work, morning to night, 7 days a week.
I know too.
You know what he's doing though?
Sounds like everybody here.
You could not have predicted this. You could not have predicted this.
He's also tweeting a lot. That's the thing.
So is SBF.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Amazing that people can find the time to tweet. We should note Tesla is down more than 50% from the highs of last November. And then Hasbro actually having its biggest drop since March of 2020, finishing the day down by 9.9%.
Did you see why?
I did see why. Were you a big Magic the Gathering player as a child?
No,
Romaine,
but
like
I'm
me?
always amazed. Someone pointed this out to me a couple years ago, how much of their revenue actually came from that. It's something like 15% of revenue and something like 30% of their adjusted earnings.
35% of EBITDA and 15% of revenue. That's according to an analyst, Jason Haas, who said that card prices are falling. He's talking Magic the Gathering. Game stores are losing money, collectors are liquidating, and large retailers are cutting orders. This from Bank of America analysts. So,
Taylor, do you have any idea what they're talking about?
You know, I just go to bond yields.
You didn't play Magic the Gathering?
Come on.
Apparently, I don't know. I have to figure out if my mom still has all my cards.
Can
from
we
when I was a
investigate the
kid.
connection between Magic the Gathering and crypto? Because I remember seeing a great article on Bloomberg, by the way, a few years ago about the connections between
The correlation
Oh, I
between
should go look at that.
Yeah.
One to
it's
one?
a correlation chart for you.
Fourth grade Tim never thought he'd be talking
Fourth
about
grade
Magic the Gathering.
or was that 30-year-old?
Last year.
So your future Tim was already being mapped out way back
Very
then.
rude.
When in doubt, Carol, go to bond yields.
Please.
Pull up the bond yields. Save us.
What's the
from
correlation
Hasbro.
with Magic at the Gathering?
Yields are up. That's all you need to know. And I think what is so interesting, and Carol, I know that we talked a lot about this on Thursday because, of course, Friday the bond markets were closed. But you're back up to about a 4 handle. Now, the 10-year yield is different. You're still down to a 387, but you've sort of had a little bit of a lift up today where mostly across the curve you can actually still get about a 4%. And that's just been a key level as you think about relative value and where we are and what 4% can finally bring you for the last time in, what, a decade? It's really been that long.
Well, I always think it's interesting, too, to take a look at what happened with the bond market and then kind of juxtapose that against what's going on in the equity market. And it felt like, and help me out here, Taylor, you are our bond expert, but I mean, it does feel like there's a lot more volatility in the equity trade today versus what we saw in the bond trade.
We were talking about this, Romaine. I know that you were here. When we think about the bond story that has been consistent, we've talked a lot about the Fed speak, a lot about the data, the retail sales, the PPI data, the consistent narrative that yields are rising, and you've seen the lack of consistency within that equity trade today. So it is at least a bond market that's really focused on that data to come.
And it gets to the bigger issue, too, who's really calling, I think, the shots right now on the macro and the economy. Is it the equity market that's getting it right, or is it the bond market that's getting it right?
Well, most would say, right, the smart investor, forgive me, equity traders that are out there and equity
You always
investors.
say this, Carol.
Well, no, but guests
There you
come
go,
on
the
and
smart money
say
and
that the
equity
smart
traders
money is the bond market and the
Really?
treasury trade.
What are the crypto traders?
Too soon, Romaine.
Class on their own.
Too soon.
Come on.
Hey, you know what's not too soon
TBD.
is that the end of earnings season, because we still got a few companies to report, namely earnings this week coming from the likes of Home Depot. We got Lowe's, we got Gap, Taylor. So we'll get some insight. What was that, Target? Walmart too. Yes, of course, a very important one coming tomorrow before the bell. And we'll get some insight into what the companies think about the fourth quarter. I mean, look at what Amazon said about its growth for the fourth quarter for the holiday season. Are we going to hear something similar from Walmart?
Yeah, desperately curious when you think about the inventory, the discounting, the health of the consumer, the not so much maybe the layaway trade, but more of the trading down if you're feeling pinched.
Yeah, well, when we talk about the inventory and the discount, I just tell you anecdotally, the number of emails and other things I've been getting from retailers all already offering pretty interesting discounts ahead of Black Friday.
Yeah.
So these are already in effect. I mean, so you can go out and buy that stuff now. I think that's, I mean, it's just anecdotal evidence, but it's interesting
Oh,
to see.
good. So you bought us stuff?
Yeah, what did you get?
Oh, for you? No. I got Carol something.
How much
What are
does
those-
a lump
wait,
of coal
I have
cost?
to, I have to make up for all
There's
the time.
some Magic the Gathering cards on sale right now. That's what everybody's getting for Christmas.
No, Tim. Tim knows what's in his stocking.
All right, guys,
great.
we got to run. Some great conversation. Our cross-platform coverage, counting you down to the close and taking you through the close beyond the bell. Our cross-platform on radio, TV, YouTube, and on Bloomberg Quick Take. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.